Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Keep Up with Pryme. Today, we are putting the focus on nonprofits. I'm Laura Andradas, marketing lead at Pryme Global, and together with Ask Host, product manager at Pryme Global, we will show you the newest features for teams across nonprofits and charities. Should you have questions along the way, please use the chat or the Q&A section, and we will cover them at the end of the presentation. And now over to you, Asken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Let's start out with having a look at what's new. So for the February release, we have added a number of new features in different areas. Some of these are specifically related to nonprofit and others are more generic. We will go through them in the order of how they fit into a project lifecycle, and I'll try to guide us through these step by step. The first area is the setup and creation of projects. There we have some new functionality related to project creation. This is more of an architectural change, so that can be relevant if there are customizations done. It doesn't really affect the end user. It is more something to be aware of if there have been changes made specifically for a certain company in that area. Where this is shown is within what we call feature management. So open up Progressor's feature management, and you will see a list of features that are coming or has come into the product and can be enabled. Some of these will become mandatory in the future, and the first one on the list, the Create Project Common, is one such function. It is set to be enabled from version 28. As I said, this doesn't really change how the user interface works or the process works. It's an architectural change where we have consolidated a lot of the code around project creation. So if you know that you have an installation with customizations in the project creation area, this might be a time to test if it still works after this one is enabled. So I would recommend enabling this in a sandbox and testing project creation. Next up on the list is what we have in the plan area. And here we have some functions that are specifically relevant to fund allocation. Specifically, I will call out 3 changes. One is default reservation methods for fund allocation lines, date filters for reversals, and capped fund reservations or cap fund reservations at budget. So let's have a look at it. The defaulting happens in Pryme funding setup. In the past, when you created new lines in fund allocations, you had to decide for every line what the fund reservation method would be. Now you can default this. This can be defaulted to either amount or percentage, or you can leave it blank and then you'll have to select it every single time. And I'll select it as percentage because that's what I used most of the time. So just making entry a little bit easier by having a default value. Here we also see a setting for restrict budget, and the restrict budget function means that if you turn this on, you cannot reserve more than what is budgeted on the project. So if I try to create a very large reservation of fund on a project, but I haven't budgeted for that much money, I am stopped in that process. So let's have a look at what that looks like. If I open up a project where I have allocated funds, let's take this one as an example. Oh, that was wrong. So let's take this one as an example. We can see here that we have a total project budget, and I have an amount reserved, which corresponds to this. If I increase this to a very large amount, let's say I increase this to 50,000, because I want to make sure that this money, there's a lot of money reserved in case that budget should increase. I will be told that you cannot reserve more than 100% of the budgeted amount, and so I must reduce that. So nobody can come in and set aside more money than we have budgeted for. In that case, we would need to increase the budget of the project first. The last new features are related to reversals. We now have 2 extra fields or pieces of information that we need when we do reversals of usage. So when you do reverse usage, you will first of all be prompted to add a posting date, which is the date we will post a reversal on. And secondly, you can decide to set a date filter. So if you only want to reserve a certain period back in time, let's say we have posted our usage for the previous month, we realized that was a mistake, and so we don't want to have the reversal for the previous month. I could put in here that or from the previous year, so maybe from January 1st and forward, that is what I want to reverse. Then it would only include that amount. So you can have a date here where you limit where you do the reversals. Further in the planning area, if we look into work planning, we have some new features for work planning. Work planning is functions that are residing in our Project Work app, which is part of the non-profit industry package, but you can of course have fund management without that as well. So this is not for everybody, but if you're using the work planning features, we now have a calendar and we have some new defaulting, and we also have email notifications. The work item calendar is something where when you open up a project, and from here you can look at what you have planned as work. We can see here I have some non-started work items. I have some work items that are in progress. This we've always been able to look at on a Kanban board where we can see who is working on what, and we can look at this by stage or by timeline, something like that, and we can see who is working on which parts of this project. The new feature is a calendar view, which gives a clearer timeline. So if I move back in time here a little bit, we can see that for this couple of days, someone will install a panel, then we'll do some weatherproofing, etc. So we have this kind of clear timeline of work being performed. This can either be in this month view, or it could be more of a timeline where I look at when we are doing things, and I can actually change the dates. I can move this and say we want to move the due date up a little bit. I could also group this by who it's assigned for, so I can look at the different people I have that are working on this project and set the dates. So it makes it a little bit easier to move things around time-wise. I mentioned defaulting values. One of those features is within project templates, where you can now select a default for what work process you will use on new projects. So you can have that pre-selected. And lastly, when we do have work items with somebody assigned to it, and we assign somebody else, or a work assignment with nobody assigned on it, and we assign it to somebody else, we can now send out email notifications so people will be aware of this. This must be specifically activated within the Pryme Project Work setup, where there are now checkboxes for send assignment notifications, send overdue to start notifications, and send overdue to complete notifications. The assignment notification emails are sent out immediately as a change happens. The overdue notifications will be sent out on a schedule, and they of course send out if you pass the date without having that work completed or without having that work started. In order to schedule them, you must use the schedule email notifications function in Pryme Project Work setup. Next up, we have within the area of reporting added an integration to cash flow forecast. Cash flow forecast is a function of Business Central that allows you to forecast for cash flow in many different ways. This has actually existed for a long time, and we have had features for quite some time to include entries that related to funding. So we will see fund ledger entries and funds included in here. What is new is that we also include anything related to budgets, so project budgets and scheduled billings and project ledger entries. So you can make much more exact and true cash flow forecasts within here. So when you create your worksheet lines for the cash flow forecast, you can now select to include things like a project budget or project ledger entries, and they will be forecast as lines. Of course, when you do this, you must select which cash flow forecast this should go into. Otherwise, you will get a message, and we can see these are now the entries that will be created and will be in the cash flow forecast. Next up, we have the area of work, where we have a few new features related to time, a field for showing the number of hours in reopened timesheets. That is a quite specific change. It is for when you reopen timesheets, it is sometimes nice to be able to see how much time is in that reopened timesheet as opposed to what is in a normally open timesheet. We have now a feature for timesheet reminders. If you're using the timesheet reminders in Pryme Time, you can now set these up to be sent out early. Previously, the reminders would send after the end of the period. So if you're using weekly timesheets, we couldn't send the reminder out until midnight between Sunday and Monday. There is now an option to allow these to be sent out earlier. So let's open up Pryme Time setup, and I will schedule some reminders, let's say for unsubmitted timesheets to resources. I can go under options and I can select a number of pre-period days, meaning if the timesheet ends Sunday to Monday, I would like to be able to send out reminders on Friday. That means I'm actually 3 days early. So I can say -3 days. That allows me to send those reminders out on Friday, even though the period technically hasn't ended. You could still report time on Saturday and Sunday, but in many cases, people do not do that. So it can be nice to send out those reminders a bit early and tell them, hey, don't forget to submit your timesheet. We have a small change in journals where we have added more intelligent lookups to look up projects and tasks. And also in purchases, we now have purchase order matching. I think we can skip that one for here. But let's have a look at the journal side. If I have a time journal, for instance, the field for project numbers now don't open a lookup page anymore. They open a drop down, so you can immediately go in here and you can write something and it will slim down that list and you can just tap to the next field and it's very easy to enter. This is part of a bigger UI overhaul we are doing of some of the areas where we see some changes we could make, small changes to just make life a little bit easier for everybody. In the area of invoicing within contracts, we now allow split invoicing. This is a bit of a special case, but if you're doing projects and these projects, they roll up together in a contract and you want this to be funded or paid for by multiple funders and you want to send invoices to them according to a certain split. Let's say it's a joint venture between two funders, they pay 50-50 each, and you want to send those invoices, then you could set that up as a contract split. The way that works is on a contract, you can define a split on the invoicing. So in here, I can say customer split % and say There are two that will pay for this. It is a Datum Corporation paying 50%, and it is Trey Research paying 50%. Now, when doing this, of course, you have to align this with the funding as well, if this is also a funded project that you're raising invoices for. But it is a possibility to do. It could also be for unfunded projects where you want to invoice this out. You add this, and whenever you create an invoice for this contract, it will be split into if it is based on time and material entries. You must also check the Use Customer Split button. The last area is time and material subcontracting. Time and material subcontracting we of course use when you're using subcontractors to perform part of the work. We looked at this in the November Keep Up with Pryme section. And the feature here is that you can create subcontractor statements based on the work that subcontractors have done for you. And from there, you can either work with self-billing, or you can use this to match against the invoices that the subcontractor is sending you and make sure that their invoices match exactly with what you have agreed to pay for. And so what we add up in here is some totals in fact boxes. That could be the number of hours in total. And we also allow you to email out those statements to subcontractors, especially if you have a lot of subcontractors. It's very easy to do that for the entire list of statements. You just open this up and run it, and then it will send an email to each subcontractor with an attached PDF with the statement. Lastly, when you create subcontractor statements, if you want an approval process that's based on who is responsible for a certain project, then you can decide to split the statements by project or by project manager. These were the features I wanted to show you today. Let's shift gears a little bit and look at the future. So this is our roadmap for 2026 across the different apps we offer. I'll not go into detail of all the changes that are coming. I'll try to focus on what I think is mostly relevant in the non-profit area. So for funds and grants, we hope to ship a feature in Q1 with more advanced restrictions around funding. In the purchase area, and that is for the API automation, the automated handling of purchases and invoices, we will introduce some new features around matching of purchase orders. Moving into Q2, for funds and grants, we will work with commitment invoicing. That means that we are connecting up the commitments that you create with the invoices that you create from the projects. And so also getting paid for an invoice will automatically mark the corresponding commitment as paid either in full or in part. So you don't have to do that manually. When it comes to time tracking, we are adding a feature for time tracking outside of Business Central. This will be a small app that you can run on your desktop, and it will be very fast and easy to track your time. We might even integrate it into other Microsoft products such as Outlook or Teams. That is not in the scope in the first place, but it's just to have something that is a bit easier to work with for the average user than going into Business Central to track their time. Within work planning, we add some new structuring with work item types, and we will make it easier to assign people to the work items with some roles and rules. In the purchase areas, we will add new features to incoming invoices in Pebble format, and there will also be some enhancements to the text-to-account mapping. Then we'll introduce a new app for risk management. This one I am excited about. So when you're running projects and you need to do risk management, you can do that on a project, or in the first iteration here, it will be on a project basis where you can list a number of risks. You can do a risk assessment. So these risks will of course come from a risk register. You will adjust the likelihood of it happening, the severity, and then it will give it a score, and you will get a risk matrix out of that. We will keep working on these features, and when we get to Q3, Q4, we'll see there are more features coming for that risk management app. So we'll also be able to do risk management per, in this case, it says client. In this case, it is probably more on a, we would call them funders, and probably even moving further out into the following year, that might even be for subcontractors and vendors as well. So we want to embrace everything you work with and be able to do risk management for it. And again, late in the year, we also want to introduce some AI features to help you identify and classify those risks to make that easier to work with. Also in Q3, Q4, we will work with funds and grants. We will work with indirect cost reallocation. So that is a scenario where you have costs on one project and you want to somehow reallocate that to one or more other projects. That could be overhead costs that have been collected on one project or multiple projects and need to be reallocated out as a form of overhead cost to other projects according to some key. That could be the size of those projects or something else. We will work with approval workflows, so we have some proper approval workflows in place for approving fund allocation. We will add some features for migrating existing data. So this is for new customers coming onto the solution, where it might be relevant to take a history of grants and funds and migrate that history into Pryme Fund Management. And lastly, we will do some more on the reporting side, having more example reports for things like funder reporting especially, but also other financial reporting related to funding. There will be some new features related to project budgeting, allowing tighter control of changes to budgets, commenting on changes, and making sure that when you have approval process around budget changes, that these are more tightly controlled and easier to follow. Within work planning, we will look at some personalizations and capabilities to make a more personalized experience around the Kanban boards, and also maybe connecting the work items to work assignments. And lastly, for time tracking, if that is relevant, there will be some policy checks where you can define rules about how you work with time entries. So that's the roadmap for 2026 as it looks right now. It will probably change somewhat, but this is our plan at this point in time.